you might be operating from the wounded feminine, which in the short term can give you results that you think are empowering. Unbothered doesn't mean that you don't care. Unbothered means that you are focused. The authentic, true, and not wounded masculine is going to be attracted to the true and unwounded feminine. It's difficult out there not to fall back into negative patterns because society rewards the wounded feminine as successful. But the wounded feminine is going to get burnt out because the wounded feminine has a large component of operating from masculinity. Today I wanted to talk about the wounded feminine. A lot of the advice online that I've noticed about femininity and the female self-help space is rooted in the wounded feminine. Now, I am not saying that I am perfect. There are things that I have said online that I regret or I've backtracked on, and I feel as though I've done a really good job at clarifying the points where I maybe misspoke. So this definitely isn't like a video insulting or downgrading other femininity creators. That is not the point of this video. This video is to make you aware of what the wounded feminine is and how at surface level it looks like self-help advice, sounds self-empowering, it sounds confident, but deep down it's rooted in fear. And that's a big reason why on my channel I always encourage acknowledging your traumas, acknowledging your jealousy, really being honest with yourself about your flaws. Because if you don't and you try to push them aside in the name of empowerment, you might be operating from the wounded feminine, which in the short term can give you results that you think are empowering, but in the long term are not the true foundation of femininity. This video was inspired by a lot of current catchphrases that I've heard on the internet, such as mankeeping, detaching from men, decentering men. Although there is a lot of advice that takes this terminology and spins it into true femininity, I want you to be aware and be able to spot the advice that comes from the wounded feminine. Before we get into the video, I do want to say that I appreciate every time you hit the like button on my videos. It really helps reach the women who need to hear this message. When you leave your thoughts down below, as long as it is respectful, it is always welcomed on this channel. And of course, a big shout out to my members who help support the message on this channel. I will leave a link in the description box if you are interested in becoming a member. And I also post videos occasionally on that side of the channel, in addition to privating some videos just as a thank you to my members. So the true feminine is open. She feels things deeply. I've talked about over the past couple weeks the concept of taking ownership of your emotions, even the negative ones, feeling things thoroughly, not pushing them away. The sad, the beautiful, feeling things deeply is the true feminine. Also, like I mentioned before, understanding your emotions and alchemizing them, finding a place of peace is true femininity. And living your life deeply does, again, sometimes come with pain, but the reward of doing so in the moments of joy bring you true feminine peace. So what is the wounded feminine? The wounded feminine sees her emotions and she becomes armored. She approaches relationships like business transactions. She steps into relationships based on what she can extract and how she can detach. She essentially has one foot out the door when it comes to romantic relationships, but also friendships and basically any other type of interaction. Now, at surface level, this sounds like self-empowerment. You know, protect yourself so that you don't get hurt. But I will say again, unfortunately and fortunately, the true feminine understands that being open and vulnerable is where she is going to feel sadness, but she's ultimately going to feel fulfillment and joy. One example of the wounded feminine is the concept of decentering men. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I have seen some lovely creators such as my friend Mrs. Midwest who have taken the concept of decentering men and have encouraged women to focus on their femininity, their own goals, their happiness. And I 100% stand by that because this can actually be a beautiful practice of femininity. Investing in your hobbies, nurturing the things that you love, building high self-esteem and self-identity. Even the Bible tells us that we don't have to follow a man into something immoral, for example. I will always encourage healthy boundaries. But the wounded feminine, the modern version of decentering men, treats men as disposable, constantly testing them to see what they will give you. These are all transactional things that seem to be self-empowerment, but they are masculine in their energy. The feminine cares. The feminine is not detached. The feminine feels. The feminine wants to nurture. I have talked about being unbothered, but unbothered doesn't mean that you don't care. Unbothered means that you are focused on your femininity. And a part of your femininity, true femininity, is opening yourself to potentially getting hurt, to potentially being embarrassed. And I repeat, it doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries, but they're reasonable boundaries that don't prevent you from not being able to nurture connections, friendships, your family. So much advice out there is to cut off people. There's a lack of advice of meeting in the middle, of refining the negative aspects of yourself and having that masculine feminine flow in a romantic relationship, for example. And remember that the authentic, true, and not wounded masculine is going to be attracted to the true and unwounded feminine. You can't expect a man to approach you in his healthy masculine and provide for you in his healthy inspirational masculine if you are approaching relationships in a transactional, closed off way. And there's so much even feminism content out there, bear with me, that I agree with, like emotional labor, the softness of a woman, but then it turns around and shames more traditionally feminine women. It's like I stick with them 95% of the message, and then that 5% at the end operates from wounded feminine. It encourages distance, and anything that encourages distance is operating from wounded feminine. The assumption that men will hurt you, the assumption that other women can never be trusted, the assumption that you need to be completely ruthless in your career and academics. I know for many of you at this point, the advice that I'm giving to you might make you cringe and you might want to be turning off this video right now. But like I've said in the last few videos that I have created, if you stick with my advice, I guarantee after like 60 to 90 days, you will find more success in your femininity by going against the grain of modern women's self-help advice. Because I'm not telling you to put yourself in a position where you will be abused. I'm not telling you, again, to not have boundaries. I am telling you to reconsider the trauma that you might be operating from and the walls that you have put up and the assumptions about others that you have, again, from the trauma and the wounded feminine message that is surrounding us, that is ever most popular. The truth is, you cannot have a successful relationship or any successful relationships in your life, even beyond romantic, without vulnerability. Women are just told, instead of acknowledging relationship problems, instead of getting to the root of why perhaps a woman is abused or like taken advantage in a friendship or in the workplace, we have instead just hidden behind the message of get a job, see what you can get from this, get your bag. It is more helpful to create a message of empowerment for women to identify abusive men, to have strong communities that are only nurtured through relationship with other people, that guard against abuse and taken advantage, that serve as that cushion rather than dismiss this root issue behind the concept of decentering, picking apart the concept of mankeeping, viewing everything as transactional. It actually takes a strong, secure woman to enter into a feminine masculine relationship or just embrace her true femininity. And this is a little bit of a side note, but in this economy, if I were a man who was a predator, and abusers are predators, I would definitely not be looking for the housewife, stay-at-home mom woman to abuse. I would be looking for the career woman that I can financially drain, attach myself to her assets, and bait and switch. Many men who have stay-at-home moms right now, they need like side hustles or 2 jobs, or like they really are spending 12-hour days. The trope of the soft life and the woman who is traditionally feminine being taken care of and provided for, it's actually the harder path for a man to take in this economy. But I digress. But the masculine concept of provision, protection, emotional stability, stoicism, which is adjacent and opposite to receptivity, openness, vulnerability, a comfort with being vulnerable because she has strong self-worth, community building, which are true essential feminine virtues. So my point with this video is to help you analyze the messaging out there, but also reroute you back to reflecting on how perhaps you still have wounds that you need to heal. I mentioned in my video about jealousy, I am not a perfect person. That is one aspect that I had to get over to become a fully embodied feminine woman. It's difficult out there not to fall back into negative patterns because society rewards the wounded feminine as successful. But the wounded feminine is going to get burnt out because the wounded feminine has a large component of operating from masculinity. Being in a relationship where the give and take is mutual is labeled as pick-me energy or man-keeping. But true femininity is not advocating for wearing yourself down. That in itself is actually masculine to achieve certain goals in your household, for example. Not being able to ask for help, feeling as though all of the burden of everything is on your shoulders. Man keeping, or wanting to make a home for your husband, be a soft presence, listen to his struggles, be a shoulder to lean on, while he also recognizes that the woman carries more emotional and mental load on average based on how we are wired, is not the negative checklist that modern culture describes it to be today. Feminine devotion calls for masculine devotion. It's not manipulation. It's a partnership. So I do want to give you a couple tools that I wrote down in my phone, and questions you can basically ask yourself quickly to see if you are operating from wounded feminine. Am I living with constant mistrust? Do I have a difficult time trusting people? Am I approaching relationships like transactions? Am I detaching and shutting down and dismissing my emotions rather than feeling and processing? Am I degrading other women who express their femininity different than me? Do I view women who live a soft life as weak, or do I automatically think that they're going to get screwed over in some way? Do I have no space for nuance and understanding other women and their perspective? Because again, like I mentioned in the video a couple minutes ago, I listen to all different types of feminine perspectives, even if I disagree with the solution. I respect the opinion, the lived experiences, the abuse, the trauma of all different women, and I honor their pain, even if I disagree with the way that it has to be dealt with. Because that is feminine openness. That is the ability to see the perspective from other people without just letting your biases get in the way. But the concept of your limitations and your boundaries, you can disagree with the solution, you can disagree with the outcome, you can disagree with the tools that somebody else is using, but you can still honor their pain and acknowledge that what they went through is true. Same with what is beautiful. You can see a more traditionally feminine woman and you should still view her as strong, even if your lived experience might contradict her lifestyle. So to conclude, thank you to everybody who has hit the like button on these videos, who has left their thoughts down below. My members, especially, of course, I cannot thank you enough. And I want to leave you with a cheesy quote and a saying that I have started to do within my videos, if you haven't yet noticed. In a world that's trying so hard to make women hard, choosing softness and true femininity might be the most radical, but the most life-giving and beautiful thing a woman can do. See you next time.